Maya's hands were covered in transmission fluid when Travis Holbrook walked past her bay for the third time that morning. She didn't look up. She knew what he was doing, the same thing he'd been doing for 6 weeks since she'd started at Holbrook's Diesel and Repair in eastern Montana, watching, waiting for her to mess up, hoping she'd ask for help. She wouldn't. The Freightliner in front of her had a shredded clutch, and she was replacing it alone, even though Jimmy and Carson had offered twice. They meant well, but every time someone helped her, it reinforced what Travis already believed, that his brother had made a mistake hiring her and that women didn't belong under 18-wheelers. The clutch job was straightforward but brutal. 600 pounds of pressure plate and disc that had to come out and go back in with millimeter precision. Her shoulders ached from holding the alignment tool steady while she threaded in the bolts. Transmission fluid had soaked through her gloves an hour ago, and her forearms were slick with it. She'd done this job a dozen times before, at other shops, but never under this kind of scrutiny. Every bolt she turned felt like it was being judged, every adjustment measured against some invisible standard that she could never quite meet in Travis's eyes. The truth was, Maya had been dealing with men like Travis her whole life. In tech school, she'd been one of 3 women in a class of 45. The instructors had been supportive, mostly, but there was always that underlying current of surprise when she outperformed her male classmates, as if competence in a woman was remarkable rather than expected. Her first job out of school had been at a Chevy dealership in Denver. The service manager had hired her reluctantly, admitting later that corporate had pressured him to diversify. She'd lasted 8 months before the comments from the other techs, some joking, some not, had worn her down enough to quit. The second job had been better. A small, independent shop run by a husband and wife team who appreciated skill over gender. She'd stayed there for 2 years, learned a lot, and had been genuinely happy. Then the owners retired and sold the shop, and the new owner had made it clear that he preferred an all-male team, which had led her here, to Montana, to a job posting she'd found online. Robert Holbrook had interviewed her over video call, asked technical questions that she'd answered confidently, and hired her without hesitation. He'd seemed genuinely excited to have someone with her experience. Travis, however, had been a different story from day one. Sanchez. Maya's wrench slipped, scraping her knuckles against the flywheel housing. She bit down on the curse that wanted to escape and pulled herself out from under the truck. Travis stood at the bay entrance, arms crossed, his Carhartt jacket dusty from the gravel lot. He was 50-something, weathered in the way men got when they'd spent decades working outdoors in Montana winters. His brother Robert, who actually owned the shop, was in Billings for a medical appointment, which meant Travis was in charge, which meant Maya's day was about to get worse. "Yeah?" she said, wiping her hands on a rag that was already beyond saving. "Got something for you." Travis's mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Out back. Maya followed him through the shop, past the other bays where Jimmy was rebuilding a cat engine and Carson was diagnosing an electrical issue on a Peterbilt. Both men glanced up as she passed, Jimmy's expression concerned. He'd worked here for 15 years and knew his boss's brother well enough to recognize when Travis was up to something. The back lot was where the shop kept the truly dead vehicles, the ones waiting for parts that would never come or that owners had abandoned when the repair bill exceeded the truck's value. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. A rusted shipping container sat against the fence, its doors hanging open, and in the center of it all, like a monument to mechanical failure, sat a 1989 Kenworth W900. It was beautiful and broken in equal measure. The long hood was sun-faded red, the chrome tarnished but still visible beneath years of neglect. The cab sat at an odd angle. One rear airbag suspension had completely failed. Moss grew along the bottom of the doors. The tires were flat, probably rotted through. Maya had seen trucks in worse condition, but not many. This one had the particular kind of decay that comes from abandonment rather than abuse. Someone had loved this truck once. You could see it in the details, the custom pinstriping along the hood that had faded but not disappeared. The aftermarket exhaust stacks that had been polished to a mirror finish before time and weather took their toll. The careful way the truck had been parked, as if someone had intended to come back to it. "That," Travis said, "belonged to Ray Patterson. You know who that was?" Maya did. Everyone in eastern Montana knew who Ray Patterson had been. Legendary owner-operator. Had run cattle and grain across 11 states for 40 years before cancer took him 3 years ago. This truck, Old Thunder people called it, had been his pride. She'd heard men at the diner in town talk about it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for family heirlooms. There were stories how Ray had driven this truck to Alaska in winter, back when that was considered nearly suicidal. How he'd pulled a stuck combine out of a mud hole in North Dakota using nothing but this Kenworth and sheer determination. How he'd once nursed it 300 miles with a failing turbo because he'd promised a rancher he'd deliver hay before a blizzard hit. Those stories had made the truck a legend. But legends, Maya thought, looking at the sagging suspension and moss-covered chrome, don't age well in reality. Ray's widow finally signed it over to Robert last month, Travis continued. Been sitting here since Ray got too sick to drive. That's 4 years of weather, rust and rot. Engines seized. Transmissions probably welded itself together. Electrical systems shot. Airlines are all cracked. Maya walked around the truck slowly. The front bumper was dented from a dozen encounters with loading docks. Bird nests clogged the air filter housing. The windshield had a spiderweb crack across the passenger side. She opened one of the storage compartments on the side of the cab and found it full of old rags, empty oil bottles, and what looked like a family of mice. The passenger door was unlocked. She pulled it open, and the hinges screamed in protest. The interior smelled like decay and abandonment, wet cardboard, mildew, something organic rotting in the sleeper berth. The leather seats were split and cracked, their foam innards spilling out. The dashboard was coated in dust so thick she could write in it, but underneath all of that, she could see quality, real craftsmanship. The dash wasn't just functional, it had been customized. Someone had installed additional gauges, routing the wires carefully, making sure everything was clean and professional. The steering wheel had a custom leather wrap that had survived better than the seats. Even the floor mats, though filthy, were heavy-duty rubber that had been chosen for durability. This truck had been loved, had been someone's pride and joy, had been maintained meticulously for decades before time and illness had finally won. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, though she already knew. Travis's smile widened. Robert's been meaning to get it running again. Promised Ray's wife he'd try to sell it, get her something for it. But nobody's had time. He paused, letting the lie hang in the air. They both knew that wasn't the real reason the truck still sat here. "You've been saying you can handle anything we throw at you, that you're as good as any mechanic here." "I am as good as any mechanic here." "Then prove it." Travis's voice carried an edge now. "Make this truck run again and I'll listen. I'll stop questioning Robert's decision. Hell, I'll even admit I was wrong about you." Maya stared at the Kenworth. It wasn't just old. It was nearly destroyed. Getting it running would require hundreds of hours of work. And she'd have to do it alone, in whatever spare time she could find, because Travis wasn't going to let her use shop hours for this. It was impossible. It was a setup, and they both knew it. "Fine," Maya said. Travis raised his eyebrows. "Fine, I'll do it. But when I get it running, not if, when, you don't just listen. You stop undermining me in front of the other mechanics. You stop checking my work like I'm an apprentice. And you tell Robert you were wrong." Something flickered across Travis's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. It was gone too quickly to tell. "Deal," he said, "but you're on your own. No help from Jimmy or Carson. No using shop equipment except off hours. And if you can't do it, He shrugged. Maybe you think about finding work somewhere else. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her alone with the dead truck. Maya stood there for a long time, staring at Old Thunder. The afternoon sun caught the chrome, and for just a moment she could imagine what it had looked like in its prime. Red paint gleaming, dual stacks polished, Ray Patterson behind the wheel, probably with a thermos of coffee and a dog in the passenger seat. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mum. "Call me when you can. It's about your dad's tools." Maya silenced the phone and shoved it in her pocket. She couldn't think about that right now. Couldn't think about the garage in Colorado where she'd grown up, or the fact that her mother was selling everything, erasing the last traces of the man who'd taught Maya everything she knew about engines. She pulled open the Kenworth's driver's side door. It groaned on hinges that hadn't moved in years. The interior smelled like old leather, dust, and something else. Cigarettes, maybe, or the ghost of diesel fuel that had seeped into every surface. The key was still in the ignition. Maya turned it. Nothing, not even a click. The batteries were long dead, assuming they were still there at all. She climbed into the cab and sat in the driver's seat. The leather was cracked, the foam beneath it disintegrating. Through the windshield, she could see Travis watching from the shop's back door. Even from this distance, she could read his expression. He thought she'd already given up. Maya thought about the last truck her father had worked on before the accident. A 1977 Chevy C10 that everyone said was beyond saving. He'd spent 2 years on it, working nights and weekends, teaching Maya every step. When it finally ran, the sound of that engine turning over had been like music. He'd looked at her and said, "Nothing's truly dead until you stop believing it can live again." 3 months later, a drunk driver had killed him on Highway 25. Maya climbed out of the Kenworth and popped the hood. The engine bay was a disaster. Rust, bird nests, and what looked like a family of mice had made their home in the air filter housing. But underneath all of that, she could see the bones of a Cummins Big Cam 4, one of the most reliable engines ever made. It would take everything she had, but she was going to make this truck run. That night, Maya stayed late after the shop closed. Travis had left at 5, right on schedule, his pickup kicking up dust as he pulled out of the lot. Jimmy had offered to stay and help, but she'd waved him off. Travis said no help, she'd reminded him. "Travis is being an asshole," Jimmy had replied, but he'd left anyway. Alone in the dim light of the back lot, Maya started making a list. She had a headlamp, a clipboard, and a determination that bordered on reckless. She walked around Old Thunder systematically, documenting every problem she could see. Tires, all 8 needed replacement. Air suspension, shot. Electrical, unknown but likely catastrophic. Engine seized, transmission unknown, airlines cracked, brake chambers probably frozen, fuel system guaranteed nightmare, interior destroyed. The list went on and on. By 9 o'clock she had 6 pages of problems. By 10, she'd pulled the air filter housing and confirmed the mice had chewed through most of the wiring harness. By 11, she'd discovered the fuel tank had a hole the size of her fist. She sat on the running board and called her mom. "Hi, honey." Her mother's voice was tired. "I was starting to think you weren't going to call back. Sorry, long day. What's up with Dad's tools?" "I've got someone interested in buying the whole set. The rolling cabinet, the specialty tools, everything. They're offering $12,000. Maya closed her eyes. Those tools had been her father's life. He'd collected them over 30 years, some of them custom-made, others passed down from his own father. She'd learned to rebuild carburetors using his tools. She'd torqued her first head bolts with his precision wrenches. That's a good offer," she managed. "I thought you might want them," her mom said softly. "I've been holding off, hoping you'd say you wanted to buy them yourself." "I can't afford $12,000, Mom. I'm barely making rent." "I know, but they should stay in the family. Your dad would have wanted you to have them. Maya looked at the broken truck in front of her. Can you give me a month? A month. I'm working on something. If it goes well, I might be able to make it happen. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Okay, 1 month. But after that I need to sell, honey. I can't keep paying for the storage unit. After they hung up, Maya sat in the darkness doing math in her head. Even if she picked up every overtime hour available, even if she skipped meals and ignored her student loans, she couldn't come up with $12,000 in a month. Unless... She looked at Old Thunder. Trucks like this, fully restored, could sell for $70,000, $80,000. Even in just running condition, it might fetch 30 or 40. If she could get it running, if Robert gave her a commission on the sale. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot she had. Maya stood up, grabbed her toolbox, and started disconnecting the battery cables. She'd need to replace them, along with the batteries themselves. But first, she needed to understand the extent of the electrical damage. At midnight, she found something that made her stop. Tucked into the glove box, beneath a pile of old receipts and a faded trucking atlas, was a photograph. Ray Patterson. She recognized him from the memorial article in the local paper, standing next to this very truck. It must have been taken 20 years ago, maybe more. The truck gleamed. Ray was younger, his arm around a woman who must have been his wife. On the back, in faded pencil, "First day with Old Thunder. Whatever breaks, we'll fix it together." Maya tucked the photo back where she'd found it and got back to work. The first real problem revealed itself on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks into the project. Maya had been working on Old Thunder every evening after her regular shift and all day on weekends. She'd replaced the batteries, rebuilt the air compressor, and was systematically working through the electrical system when she pulled the starter, and found that it had essentially welded itself into uselessness. Not unusual for a starter that had sat unused for 4 years, but starters for 1989 Kenworths weren't exactly stocked at the local AutoZone. She was under the truck, covered in rust flakes and old grease, when a pair of work boots appeared next to her head. "You know you're crazy, right?" Carson's voice. Maya rolled out from under the truck. Carson stood there with 2 cups of coffee from the gas station down the road. He held one out to her. Travis said no help, Maya reminded him, but she took the coffee anyway. "I'm not helping. I'm observing. And judging." Carson grinned. He was younger than Jimmy, maybe 30, with tattoos running down both arms and a beard that he kept tied with a leather cord. "Seriously, though, what's your plan here? That starter alone is going to cost you $300 if you can even find one." "I'll find one." Maya sat on the running board and sipped the coffee. It was terrible, but it was hot. "There's a guy in Wyoming who parts out old Kenworths. I called him yesterday. And the fuel tank, the one with the hole? I'm going to patch and seal it. It's not pretty, but it'll work." Carson shook his head. "You could buy a used tank for $400. "I don't have $400. The words came out sharper than she intended. Carson raised his hands in surrender. "Hey, just trying to help you think through options." "I know." Maya softened. "Sorry, I'm just... It's a lot." Carson sat down next to her on the running board. For a few minutes they just drank their coffee and looked at the truck. The morning sun was warming up, burning off the dew that had settled overnight. In the distance, someone was cutting hay, the sound of the tractor carrying across the fields. "Why are you really doing this?" Carson asked. "And don't tell me it's just to prove Travis wrong, because that's bullshit. Nobody puts this much work into something just to win an argument." Maya considered lying, considered giving him the easy answer, but something about the quiet morning, or the way Carson had brought her coffee without making a big deal of it, made her tell the truth. "My dad's tools are being sold. My mom needs the money, and I can't afford to buy them. If I can get this truck running and Robert sells it, maybe I can negotiate a commission, enough to keep the tools in the family. Shit, Carson said quietly. That's heavy. Yeah. What did your dad do? He was a mechanic, owned a small shop in Colorado, specialized in classic cars and trucks. Maya ran her thumb around the rim of her coffee cup. He was the one who taught me everything. I'd spend hours in his shop after school, handing him tools, learning how engines worked. When I was 16, he let me rebuild my first transmission. He sounds like he was a good guy. He was. Maya's throat tightened. He died 5 years ago, drunk driver. He was coming home from a job, had been working on a car at someone's house, and this guy ran a red light going 70. Carson was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. Me too. Maya finished her coffee and stood up. Anyway, that's why I'm doing this. The tools are all I have left of him. All those years of work. All that knowledge. It's in those tools. The way the wrenches are worn, the scratches on the socket set from that one time he dropped them. If they get sold to a stranger. She trailed off. They're not just tools, Carson finished. No, they're not. Carson stood and clapped her on the shoulder. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're going to get this bastard running. And when you do, Travis is going to have to eat every word he's said about you. After Carson left, Maya went back to work. She pulled the old airlines and started measuring for replacements. The work was methodical, almost meditative. Pull a line, measure it, cut new airline to length, install it, test it, over and over. Her phone rang around noon. An unknown number. This Maya Sanchez? Yeah. This is Don Reeves down in Wyoming. You called about a Kenworth starter? Maya's pulse quickened. Yes, sir. You have one? Might. What year and engine you looking for? 89 Cummins big cam full. The sound of papers shuffling. I've got one from an 87. Should work, but I can't guarantee it. It's been sitting in my barn for 3 years. How much? $250 plus shipping. Maya did quick math. She had $412 in her checking account. Rent was due in 10 days. Can you do 200 even? She asked. And I'll drive down to pick it up, save the shipping. Don laughed. You know Wyoming's a 6-hour drive from you. I know, but I need that starter, and I need to save every dollar I can. Tell you what, you drive all the way down here, I'll do $150. Anyone desperate enough to make that drive for a part deserves a break. Maya could have hugged him. Thank you. I can come next Saturday. I'll be here. The following week was brutal. Maya's regular workload at the shop picked up. Harvest season meant every farmer in 3 counties was running their equipment into the ground, and things were breaking constantly. She worked 10-hour days on combines, tractors, and grain trucks, then spent another 4 hours every evening on Old Thunder. The work was relentless. Monday night, she replaced the air compressor, a job that should have taken 2 hours, but stretched to 5, when she discovered the mounting bolts had corroded into the frame. Tuesday, she spent 3 hours just cleaning decades of grease and grime out of the engine bay, uncovering problems she hadn't even known existed. Wednesday, one of the air tanks had a crack that leaked every time she tried to pressurize the system. Each night, she'd drag herself home around 11, shower off the day's grime, eat whatever she could find in her sparse refrigerator, and collapse into bed. Then, she'd wake up at 5:30 and do it all again. Her apartment was a single-bedroom unit above a hardware store in town. The floor sloped, the pipes banged when she ran hot water, and her downstairs neighbor, an elderly man who ran the hardware store, played polka music at volume until exactly 8 p.m. every night. But it was cheap, and it was hers, and most importantly, it was close enough to the shop that she could walk if her truck ever died. Thursday evening, while replacing a cracked fuel line, her phone rang. Her mother's number. Maya let it go to voicemail. She'd call back later, when she had the energy for that conversation. when she could explain why she was killing herself over a truck that Travis had probably set up specifically to fail. By Friday, word had gotten around town about what she was doing. The waitress at the diner, Betty, who'd worked there for 20 years, brought her a thermos of coffee when Maya stopped in for breakfast. "Heard you're bringing Ray's truck back to life," Betty said, refusing payment for the coffee. "That's something special. Ray was a good man." "Did you know him?" Maya asked. "Everyone knew Ray. He'd come in here 3-4 times a week when he was home from runs. Always sat at the counter, always ordered the same thing. Scrambled eggs, hash browns, wheat toast. Always left a $10 tip, even when his bill was only $8. Betty smiled, remembering. When he got sick, half the town helped out. People brought meals, helped with his truck maintenance, kept an eye on Martha. That's the kind of man he was. Maya sipped the coffee. It was good, much better than the sludge at the shop. What happened to the truck after he got too sick to drive? Martha couldn't bear to sell it. Ray had always said if anything happened to him, the truck should go to someone who'd love it as much as he did. But who's going to buy a used Kenworth from a widow, especially one that old? Betty refilled Maya's cup. It sat in their driveway for a year. Then Martha couldn't stand looking at it anymore, so Robert offered to store it at the shop. That was 3 years ago. And nobody tried to get it running before now. Betty shrugged. Robert's a good man, but he's been dealing with health problems, heart stuff, and Travis. She trailed off diplomatically. Travis doesn't think women can fix trucks. Maya finished. Travis doesn't think women can do a lot of things. His wife left him 10 years ago, and I think that soured him on the whole gender. Betty leaned on the counter. But between you and me, I think Robert hired you specifically to piss Travis off. Robert's a good judge of character, and if he hired you, it's because you're good at what you do. The conversation stayed with Maya as she worked that night. The idea that Robert had hired her, not despite Travis's objections, but perhaps because of them. That this whole situation, the scrutiny, the challenges, even Old Thunder itself, might be some kind of test, but not the kind she'd assumed. Travis watched it all, with barely concealed amusement. When she left at 9 o'clock one night, he was still in the office, doing paperwork. "Still at it?" he called as she walked past. "Yep." "You know, there's no shame in admitting something's beyond you." Maya stopped, turned to look at him. "Is that what you did? When things got hard, you just admitted defeat?" Travis's smile faded. "Watch yourself, Sanchez. I'm just asking, because from where I stand, giving up is the easy part. Anyone can walk away. What takes real strength is staying when everyone's waiting for you to fail." She left before he could respond, but she saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. Not anger, exactly. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like respect, buried under years of stubbornness and pride. Saturday morning, she was on the road to Wyoming by 5 a.m. The drive took her south, through empty rangeland, past antelope and the occasional oil derrick. She listened to podcasts about diesel engine repair, took notes at red lights, and tried not to think about how much gas this trip was costing her. Don Reeves's place was exactly what she expected. A sprawling property with several barns, a machine shop, and what looked like an entire field of dead trucks. Don himself was probably 70, bow-legged, with hands that looked like they'd been rebuilt a few times. "You must be Maya," he said, shaking her hand with a grip that was stronger than expected. "Come on, let's get you that starter." The barn was dark and smelled like old oil and hay. Don led her past engine blocks, transmissions, and what appeared to be an entire Peterbilt cab hanging from the ceiling. "You're really rebuilding Ray Patterson's truck?" Don asked as he climbed a ladder to a high shelf. "You knew Ray?" "Hell, everyone knew Ray. Good man. Honest. When I heard his widow was selling that Kenworth, I thought about buying it myself, just to have a piece of history." Don pulled down a grimy box. "But I'm too old to take on a project like that." He handed her the starter. It was heavy, dirty, and probably hadn't been tested in years. But the housing was intact, and when Maya turned the gear, it moved freely. "It's good," she said. "Course it is. I don't sell junk." Don climbed down the ladder. 150, like I said. Maya pulled 720s and a 10 from her wallet. Don counted it, then folded the bills and stuck them in his shirt pocket. "You really think you can get that truck running?" he asked as they walked back to her car. "I have to," Maya said simply. Don nodded, like that made perfect sense. Well, Ray would have liked that. He always said a truck isn't dead until its last owner stops fighting for it. Maya thought about the photo in the glove box. "Whatever breaks, we'll fix it together." "Yeah," she said. "That sounds like something he'd say." She installed the starter the next day, a Sunday. It bolted right up, the threads clean despite the years. She reconnected the battery, said a small prayer to whatever gods looked after stubborn mechanics, and turned the key. The starter turned. The engine didn't catch. She hadn't expected it to. It was still seized, but the starter spun the flywheel enough to tell her the electrical system was starting to come together. It was progress. Small, incremental progress, but progress nonetheless. Maya sat on the running board and allowed herself exactly 2 minutes of satisfaction before getting back to work. She had 18 days left before her mom needed an answer about the tools. The engine was next. The big, impossible, probably going to break her heart and budget job. She grabbed her tool bag and got to work. The engine fought her for 3 weeks. Maya pulled the injectors first. 4 of them were seized in their bores, and she spent an entire weekend with heat and penetrating oil, slowly working them loose. When they finally came free, one of the tips broke off, which meant she had to pull that cylinder head to remove the debris. That's when she discovered the real problem. Cylinder number 3 had water in it. Not just condensation, actual standing water. The head gasket had failed, and 4 years of Montana weather had turned the cylinder into a rust pit. The discovery hit her like a physical blow. She'd known the engine would be bad, but this was catastrophic. This wasn't something she could fix with determination and elbow grease. This required money. Money for machine work, for new parts, for things she couldn't fabricate or improvise. She sat there in the darkness, her headlamp illuminating the rusted cylinder bore, and felt something close to despair. Not because of the work, she could do the work, but because the math suddenly didn't add up. Even if she could afford to fix this, even if she could get the truck running, there was no guarantee Robert would give her enough of a commission to save her father's tools. She'd been operating on hope and stubbornness, and now reality was crashing down. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carson. "Still at the shop?" "Yeah," she typed back. "Want company?" She almost said no. Almost told him she was fine, that she didn't need help, that she could handle it alone. But something in her was tired of handling everything alone. "Sure," she replied. Carson showed up 20 minutes later with Chinese takeout and 2 beers. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks, you're a real charmer." They sat on the running board, eating lo mein straight from the containers, not talking about the engine or the problems or any of it. Carson told her about his daughter, 7 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs, convinced she was going to be a paleontologist. "She asked me the other day if I was proud of what I do," Carson said. "Fixing trucks, I mean, and I realized I didn't know how to answer." "What did you say?" "I said I was proud of doing things right, that it doesn't matter what the work is, as long as you do it well and honestly." He cracked open a beer. She seemed satisfied with that. "That's a good answer." "Yeah, but it made me think, why do we do this? Break our backs for not great pay? Dealing with people who don't respect the skill it takes. Why not just do something easier?" Maya ate a piece of orange chicken, thinking. Because some people have to do the hard things. And if we're good at it, if it means something to us, then maybe we're the ones who should. Carson nodded slowly. "Your dad, the one who taught you all this?" Was he like that? Yeah, he was. Maya set down her food. He used to say that every machine has a story. The way it breaks tells you how it was used, how it was maintained, how much someone cared about it. And when you fix it, you're not just repairing metal and gaskets, you're honoring the relationship someone had with that machine. That's deep for a guy who fixed cars. He was deep for a guy who fixed cars. Maya smiled, remembering. He'd talk to the engines sometimes, like they could hear him. My mom thought it was crazy, but he swore it helped. Does it? I don't know. But sometimes when I'm working and nothing's going right, I hear his voice in my head, telling me to slow down, to think it through, to respect the machine. She looked up at Old Thunder. He would have loved this truck. Would have spent hours just looking at how it was built, appreciating the engineering. Jimmy found her sitting on the ground, staring at the opened engine on a Tuesday evening. The shop had closed an hour ago, but he'd stayed late to finish a job. "How bad?" he asked. Maya didn't answer. She just pointed. Jimmy climbed up on the frame rail and looked down into the engine. "Fuck." "Yeah. Can you save it?" "I don't know." Maya's voice was flat. "I'd need to hone the cylinder, replace the piston, definitely replace the head gasket, and that's assuming there's no damage to the crankshaft or bearings from the water." "What's that going to cost?" "More than I have." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "I've got $400 in my account. Rent's due in 10 days. I need at least $300 for the machine work, probably another $100 for the piston and gaskets. And that's if nothing else is wrong." "What about the tools? Your dad's tools?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's the whole point of this. I need the money from this truck sale to buy the tools, but I can't fix the truck without money I don't have." Jimmy sat down next to her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, a sound so common in Montana that most people didn't even notice it anymore. But tonight, it sounded lonely. "You could ask Robert for help," Jimmy finally said. "He's a good guy. He'd probably front you the money for parts." "And what happens when Travis finds out? This whole thing was supposed to be me proving I can do it alone. Travis is an asshole who's trying to force you out. You don't owe him anything." Maya shook her head. "That's not the point. If I accept help, I'm admitting he was right, that I can't handle it." "Jesus, Maya." Jimmy's voice carried an edge now. "You do realize you don't have anything to prove, right? You're a good mechanic. Hell, you're better than good. Last month you diagnosed that injector problem on the Cat that had me stumped for 3 days. You rebuilt that Allison transmission in half the time I would have taken. Travis's opinion doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "Why?" Maya pulled at a thread on her work pants. The question hung in the air, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she could articulate. "Because every shop I've ever worked at, it's been the same thing," she finally said. "The guys are nice enough at first, but there's always someone, usually someone older, usually someone who's been there forever, who decides I don't belong, that I only got hired for diversity or to meet some quota, that real mechanics are men." She stood up, pacing in front of the truck. "And you know what? Maybe they're right to be skeptical. Maybe I do have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. But this," she gestured at Old Thunder, "this was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be me proving, once and for all, that I belong here, that I'm not just good for a woman, or good considering my age, or good with an asterisk next to it. Just good. Period." Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. "Your dad wouldn't have wanted you to kill yourself over his tools." The words hit harder than Maya expected. She turned away so Jimmy wouldn't see her face. "My dad never got to see me become a real mechanic," she said quietly. "He died when I was in tech school. All he knew was that his daughter liked working on cars. He didn't get to see me rebuild my first engine or diagnose my first electrical problem or any of it." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Those tools are the only proof I have that he believed in me, if I can't even afford to keep them." She trailed off. Jimmy stood and put a hand on her shoulder. He'd be proud of you. You know that, right? Whether you save the tools or not, whether you get this truck running or not, he'd be proud. Maybe, Maya said, but she didn't believe it. She went home that night and did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She pulled out the box of her father's things. The box her mother had given her after the funeral, filled with items from his shop. A worn work jacket, a coffee mug with a faded logo from a parts supplier, photos of cars he'd restored, and at the bottom, a notebook. Maya had looked at it once, right after he died, but it had hurt too much to read. Now she opened it. It was her father's project journal. Notes about jobs he'd worked on, sketches of engine modifications, calculations for gear ratios. His handwriting was precise, methodical, the handwriting of someone who thought through every problem before picking up a wrench. She flipped through the pages, seeing familiar projects, the Camaro he'd restored for Mrs. Henderson, the Ford pickup that he'd built from parts, She stopped. There, 3/4 through the journal, was an entry about a Chevy C10, the truck he'd been working on before he died. The one everyone had said was too far gone. The notes were detailed, every problem, every solution, every setback. She read through 2 years of her father's frustration, determination, and incremental progress. And then, on the last page he'd written on, just a few weeks before the accident. Day 647. Engine finally turned over today. Maya was there, saw her face when she heard it run. Worth every hour. Beneath that, a final note. Real mechanics don't give up on things worth saving. Maya closed the notebook and sat in her apartment's dim kitchen for a long time. Then she got up, grabbed her laptop, and started researching. Junkyards, parts suppliers, online forums for Cummins big cam rebuilds. At 2 in the morning, she found it. A machine shop in Billings that specialized in old diesel engines. They could hone the cylinder, replace the piston, and check the crank journals for $150. She called them first thing in the morning. "How fast can you do it?" she asked when they confirmed they could handle the job. "Depends on our schedule, probably a week, maybe 2. I need it in 3 days. I'll pay double." There was a pause. "You serious?" "Yes." "All right. Bring it in Monday morning. We'll have it ready Thursday." Maya pulled the piston that day. It was a brutal job, 6 hours of careful work to remove the connecting rod without damaging anything else. When it finally came free, she could see the rust damage clearly. The piston skirt was pitted, the rings frozen, but it was out. That was progress. She drove to Billings on Monday, 3 hours each way, with the piston and cylinder head in the bed of her truck. The machine shop guy, Aaron, his name tag read, whistled when he saw the rust. "This is from Ray Patterson's Kenworth, isn't it?" he asked. Maya blinked. "How did you know?" "Small world. My dad used to run loads with Ray back in the day. Heard someone was trying to resurrect old thunder." He turned the piston over in his hands. "This is going to take some work, but we can save it." "You're sure?" "Yeah. The damage isn't as bad as it looks. We'll hone the cylinder, fit a new piston, deck the head, and you'll be good to go." "Thank you," Maya said, and meant it. Driving back, she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in weeks: hope. She picked up the parts on Thursday, exactly as promised. The cylinder head gleamed, freshly decked. The new piston and rings sat in a clean box, wrapped in oiled paper. "Good luck," Erin said as she loaded everything into her truck. Ray was a good man. Be nice to see that truck run again. Maya spent Friday and Saturday reassembling the engine. It was intricate work, every bolt torqued to exact specifications, every clearance measured twice. Jimmy stopped by again, ostensibly to check on something in his bay, but really to watch her work. "You're close," he observed. "Yeah. What are you going to do if it doesn't start?" Maya tightened a headbolt to 75 foot-pounds. It'll start, but if it doesn't? She set down her Torque wrench and looked at him. Then I'll figure out why and fix it. That's what mechanics do. On Sunday morning, Maya finished the engine reassembly. She filled it with oil, primed the fuel system, and connected the last electrical harness. The sun was just coming up, painting the backlot in shades of orange and pink. She'd been working on Old Thunder for 42 days. She had 3 days left before her mum needed an answer about the tools. Maya climbed into the cab. The key was still where it had been on day one, waiting. She said a prayer to her father, to Ray Patterson, to whatever force in the universe looked after stubborn mechanics and impossible projects. Then she turned the key. The starter spun. The engine turned over once, twice, and caught. The sound was rough, uneven, but it was running. Smoke poured from the stacks, blue-white clouds of oil and moisture burning off. The cab shook with vibration, but it was running. Maya sat there, hands on the steering wheel as the engine slowly smoothed out. The morning light streamed through the cracked windshield. She could smell diesel fuel and hot oil, and the particular scent of an engine that hadn't run in years. She was crying, and didn't care who saw. Across the lot, someone shouted. Jimmy had arrived early, heard the engine, and was running toward the truck with a grin so wide it looked like it might split his face. Behind him, slower but coming nonetheless, was Travis. The three of them stood in the back lot, listening to Old Thunder run. It still needed work. The idle was rough. The exhaust was way too blue, and God only knew what else was wrong. But it was running. Travis stood there for a long time, his face unreadable. Finally he looked at Maya. "Well," he said, "I'll be damned." The morning Ray Patterson's widow came to see the truck, Maya had been awake since 4 a.m., cleaning every surface she could reach. The engine ran now, but the cab was still a disaster. Cracked leather, sun-faded plastic, decades of grime worked into every crevice. She'd worked through the night before, detailing the interior, replacing what she could afford, and cleaning what she couldn't. She'd found a used steering wheel at a junkyard in Billings. Not original, but close enough. The cracked windshield remained. A new one would cost $800, but everything else was as clean as she could make it. She'd scrubbed the floor mats until the original black rubber showed through. She'd used leather conditioner on the seats, working it into the cracks, trying to restore some semblance of dignity to the worn surface. She'd even replaced the sun-faded curtains in the sleeper berth with ones she'd sewn herself from canvas she'd bought at the hardware store. The radio didn't work. The wiring was too far gone, but the CB radio did, crackling with occasional chatter from truckers passing on the highway a mile away. She'd tested every gauge, every light, every switch. Most of them worked. The ones that didn't, she'd marked with tiny pieces of tape, planning to fix them eventually. Robert had returned from his medical appointments the day before and had stood in the back lot for 20 minutes, listening to the engine run. He hadn't said much, just walked around the truck slowly, his hand trailing along the fender, a complicated expression on his face. "You really did it," he'd finally said. "It still needs work. The idle's not perfect. The transmission shifts rough in third gear, and I haven't even tested the cruise control or—" "Maya," Robert had stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. "You brought Ray's truck back to life. That's what matters." Now at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday, a silver Honda pulled into the lot. Martha Patterson was smaller than Maya expected, 70-something, with short grey hair and a cardigan despite the morning warmth. She walked slowly, leaning slightly on a cane, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Robert met her first, taking her hand in both of his. "Martha, thank you for coming. I had to see it." Martha's gaze had already found the Kenworth, sitting in the back lot where it had been for 4 years. "Is it true? It really runs? Why don't you hear for yourself?" Robert gestured to Maya. "This is Maya Sanchez. She's the one who made it happen." Martha turned to Maya, and there was something in her expression that made Maya's throat tight. It wasn't just gratitude or curiosity, it was recognition, as if Martha saw something in Maya that others missed. "You got old Thunder running," Martha said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "How long did it take you?" "About 6 weeks, working evenings and weekends." "Why?" The question was simple, but Maya knew it was the important one. She could have given the easy answer, to prove herself, to earn Travis's respect, to save her father's tools. All of those things were true. Instead, she told the whole truth. "Because trucks like this deserve to run," Maya said. "Because your husband spent 40 years behind that wheel, and that means something. Because—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "Because I found a photo in the glove box of him the first day he got this truck. And I thought about how much pride he must have had, how much this truck meant to him. It felt wrong to let it just sit here and rot." She took a breath, continuing, "And honestly, because my dad taught me that machines have souls, not literally, but they carry the memories of everyone who worked on them, everyone who drove them, everyone who cared for them. This truck has your husband's soul in it, and letting that die felt like letting him die all over again." Martha's eyes glistened. Ray would have said something just like that. He always talked about old Thunder like it was a living thing, like it had feelings. She smiled through the tears. "I used to tease him about it, say he loved the truck more than me." "Did he?" Maya asked gently. "No, but it was close." Martha laughed, a sound that was half sob. "Would you start it for me?" Maya led her to the truck, walking slowly to match Martha's pace. Jimmy and Carson had stopped working, watching from their bays. Even Travis had emerged from the office. Maya opened the driver's door and climbed in. The engine had cooled overnight, and for just a moment she worried it wouldn't start, that something had failed in the hours since she'd last run it, that she'd brought Martha here for nothing. She turned the key. The starter spun, the engine caught immediately, and old Thunder's diesel rumble filled the lot. It was louder than modern trucks, no fancy mufflers or emission controls on something this old. The sound was raw, honest, mechanical. The cab shook with vibration, the mirrors rattling in their mounts. Martha stood next to the truck, one hand on the fender, listening. Tears ran down her cheeks openly now. She didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. She just stood there, hand on the warm metal, connected to something she'd thought was lost forever. After a long moment, she reached up and traced her fingers along the pinstriping on the hood. The custom work that Ray had done himself, decades ago, when the truck was new and the future was full of possibility. "He painted this himself," Martha said, her voice barely audible over the engine. "Took him 2 weekends. He was so proud of it. Said it made old Thunder recognizable from a mile away." She looked at Maya. "Did you know that when he got too sick to drive, this was what broke his heart? Not the cancer, not the pain. It was knowing he'd never climb into this cab again." Maya turned off the engine. The sudden silence was almost shocking. "I sat with him the night before he went into hospice," Martha continued. "He was so weak he could barely talk, but he looked at me and said, 'Make sure she goes to someone who'll understand. Not sell her for the money, not scrap her for parts, someone who'll understand.'" She turned to face Maya fully. "I didn't know what he meant at the time. I thought he was confused from the medication, but now I think he knew. He knew that someday someone would come along who'd see past the rust and decay, someone who'd fight for her." Robert appeared at her side, his own eyes red. "Martha, we can sell it now. I've already had 3 people ask about it. You'll get good money for it." Martha shook her head. "No, no, I'm not selling it." She looked up at the truck, then at Maya. "Ray made me promise something before he got too sick to talk. He said if anyone ever got this truck running again, truly running, not just limping along, then they were supposed to have it. Maya's heart stopped. Mrs. Patterson, he said a truck like this needs someone who understands what it means, someone who'll take care of it, not just own it. Martha turned to face Maya directly. I think that's you. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to buy it, honey. I'm giving it to you on one condition. Maya couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. Ray wanted this truck to keep working, Martha continued. He hated the idea of it sitting in a museum or a collector's garage. So if you take it, you have to promise you'll drive it, use it, keep it alive. I promise, Maya managed. I absolutely promise. Robert cleared his throat. Martha, are you sure? This truck could sell for $40,000, maybe more. I'm sure. Martha patted the fender. Money doesn't matter as much as knowing it's going to someone who'll love it the way Ray did. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Maya. Oh, and honey, check under the driver's seat. Ray always kept a surprise there for whoever came after him. After Martha left, Maya stood next to Old Thunder for a long time, trying to understand that it was hers. The truck she'd spent 6 weeks resurrecting. The impossible project that was supposed to prove she belonged here. It was hers. Travis approached slowly, hands in his pockets. That was something, he said. Maya turned to look at him, waited. I was wrong, Travis said. The words seemed to physically pain him. About you, about this truck, about all of it. Yeah, you were. You're a hell of a mechanic, Sanchez. Better than I gave you credit for. He stuck out his hand. I owe you an apology and a beer, maybe several beers. Maya shook his hand. His grip was firm, honest. 1 beer, she said, and you tell Robert I deserve a raise. Travis actually laughed. Deal. After he left, Maya climbed into the cab and reached under the driver's seat. Her hand found an envelope, sealed, with her name on it in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it. Inside was a key, not to the truck but smaller, brass, and a note in Martha's handwriting. Ray wanted you to have this too. It's the key to his storage unit just outside of town. Unit 47. He kept parts there, tools, things he collected over the years for this truck. Said whoever truly cared enough to bring Old Thunder back to life would need them. Everything in that unit is yours now. God bless you for what you did. Martha Maya stared at the key, storage unit, tools. She called her mother. Mom, remember Dad's tools? Yes, honey. I'm sorry, but the buyer is coming this weekend. If you can't come up with the money, I have a better idea. Can you hold them for me for another month? I suppose so, but I'm coming to get them. I'm driving down with a truck, and I'm bringing them back here. You have the money? No, but I have something better. 2 days later, Maya drove Old Thunder out of the lot for the first time. She'd spent 18 hours going through the storage unit, and the truck bed was loaded with parts, tools, and a lifetime of Ray Patterson's collected wisdom about keeping a Kenworth alive, including in a sealed box marked Important, an envelope with $12,000 in cash and a note. For whoever brings her back, a good truck is worth investing in. Ray, Jimmy, and Carson were outside when she pulled out, and both of them cheered. Jimmy held up his phone, taking a video. Where you headed? He called. Colorado, Maya shouted over the engine's rumble. To get my father's tools. The drive south was long, loud, and glorious. Old Thunder ran rough in places, and there were a dozen small issues Maya had noted to fix later. But the truck was solid, and every mile felt like a promise kept. She thought about her father, about Ray Patterson, about 2 men she'd never seen in the same room, but who understood the same truth, that some things are worth fighting for, worth the long hours and bloody knuckles and moments of doubt. That real mechanics don't give up on things worth saving. The sun was setting when she crossed into Colorado. The mountains rose ahead of her, purple in the fading light. In the passenger seat, she'd placed the photo she'd found in the glove box. Ray and his wife, first day with Old Thunder. Next to it, she'd placed a photo of her own, her father, standing next to the Chevy C10 they'd built together, his arm around teenage Maya's shoulders. 2 trucks, 2 mechanics, 2 legacies. She downshifted as the grade increased, and the engine responded perfectly. The chrome stacks gleamed in her mirrors, catching the last light of day. By the time she reached her mother's house, it was dark. Her mother stood in the driveway, staring at the massive Kenworth idling in front of her home. "Is that Ray Patterson's truck?" Maya confirmed. "And it's mine now." Her mother's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, honey." "Come on," Maya said. "Help me load Dad's tools. They're going home." They worked by the truck's lights, moving the rolling tool cabinet and boxes from the storage unit into Old Thunder's sleeper berth and toolboxes. Every wrench, every socket, every carefully maintained piece of equipment. When the last box was loaded, Maya's mother stood back and looked at the truck. "Your father would have loved this," she said quietly. "Yeah? Oh, absolutely. The truck, the project, all of it. He would have been so proud." She turned to Maya. "And he would have loved that you didn't give up." Maya hugged her mother hard. "Thank you for waiting, for holding on to the tools." "They were never mine to sell," her mother said. "They were always yours." Maya drove through the night, heading back to Montana. The tools rattled gently in the cab. The engine hummed its rough, honest rumble. Somewhere past the Wyoming border, she pulled over at a rest stop and slept in the sleeper berth, surrounded by her father's tools and Ray Patterson's legacy. When she woke at dawn and climbed back into the driver's seat, there was a text from Robert. "Welcome back. When you get here, come see me. I've got a proposal for you." She arrived at the shop around noon. Robert was waiting in the office. "Martha called me," he said without preamble. "Told me what she did, giving you the truck." "Yeah, that was generous of her." "It was." Robert leaned back in his chair. "I've been thinking, that storage unit of Ray's, you said it had parts." "Tons. Everything you'd need to maintain and repair a fleet of old Kenworths. I've got 3 customers with vintage trucks. They're always looking for parts, for someone who understands the old systems." Robert tapped his desk. "What if we start a division here? Classic truck restoration and maintenance. You'd run it. Keep Old Thunder as the showcase. Use Ray's parts. Build something." Maya stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You just proved you can do the impossible. And there's a market for it. Guys like Ray, who had trucks they loved, who want them preserved." He named a salary that was 30% more than she was making now. "What do you say?" Maya thought about the photo in the glove box, about her father's tools, finally home, about 6 weeks of bloody knuckles and midnight doubts, about proving that some things are worth fighting for. "I say yes," she said. 6 months later, Maya stood in the expanded yard of Holbrook's Diesel and Repair, where Old Thunder was now fully restored and surrounded by other classic trucks awaiting work. The journey hadn't been easy. She had sorted through Ray's storage unit full of labeled parts and found $12,000, which she used to buy her father's tools and rebuild the truck completely. A long drive to Colorado to retrieve the tools deepened her connection to the machine and to the legacy of both Ray and her father. Now she had her own restoration bay, and even Travis, once skeptical, respected her skills. The shop had become her place, and she proved she belonged there. Soon a rancher asked her to restore his late father's Freightliner as a memorial, reinforcing what Old Thunder had come to represent, fixing broken things and honoring memories. Maya drove the truck onto the Montana highway, reflecting on how far she'd come. Truckers recognized Old Thunder over the CB radio, confirming Ray's legacy lived on. As the sun set, she continued forward, mechanic's daughter and keeper of legacies, ready for whatever came next.